bringing these characters to life. I started doing Georgia O'Keeffe in part because I really did want to have an artist.
Yes.
It needed to be an artist, I felt, whose works could be seen by the majority of my audiences. And I know, and I knew that the Art Institute of Chicago had about 21 O'Keeffe paintings, and the Milwaukee Art Museum has, I think they have like 24 of them. So that was enormously helpful in doing it. What I discovered was that she actually is a really, she's a wonderful person for a historical portrayal, because first of all, she's a household name. Second of all, and you can see her works. But second of all, even if you're not interested in art, what she had to say about how she reacted to the world around her, the landscape, flowers, you know, the sky, it's something that people can relate to, even if they're not interested in art. And actually, I've had this program. In fact, the program I'm doing her this afternoon for, it's a gardening club, and they're interested in her because of her interest in nature. So that's been really fruitful. And she's also, at least towards the end of her life, she became quite a character, not eccentric, but, you know, people would show up at her house and she would walk out to the driveway and she said, "Oh, you're here to see me? Well, here I am. There's the front of me. There's the back of me. Anything else?" So she was famously kind of prickly, which lends itself to sort of a dramatized portrayal. She's very visually identifiable, you know, the headscarf that she liked to wear, and she usually wore black. She has a pull on audiences. In other words, it's a hook that gets people in, and they then are much more likely to be drawn into paying attention to the other parts of her that I think are really interesting about, you know, how did she become a woman working in an art world that was so deeply male, you know. And there was a man who said to her, you know, one of the students of the Art Students League in New York said to her, "Well, you know, I'm going to be a famous artist. You'll probably just teach art at a girls' school somewhere." And I think she always fought against that notion that she didn't want to be seen as a woman artist. She wanted to be seen as an artist. And the flower paintings, which we are still among her most beloved paintings. I was just at a museum gift shop the other day, and they had some Georgia O'Keeffe note cards, and sure enough, they were all of her flowers. It's an easy way to get into her art. But I think she, as much as she was drawn to the colors and the way you can zoom in on the abstract features of her flowers, I think she never gave up doing flowers, but I think she pulled away from them in part because flowers were seen as this innately womanly kind of a thing to paint. So she made her flowers enormous and big, and the sexualized readings of them, which might or might not have been encouraged by Alfred Stieglitz, her husband, who is a really good art promoter of her work. I don't think that's where she wanted to be read. So what I always hope is that you get pulled in by, you know, the stories that she tells, you know, the fact that she, you know, she liked to sleep outside on her roof naked because it gave people something to talk about. But what it gets at is the fact that this was a woman who really was pushing against the boundaries of what an American artist could do, what modern art meant, what it meant to be a woman in an art field. And then I hope at the end, we can actually talk about, you know, well, how many female artists are there in art museums today? Answer is not a lot. And nobody really wants quotas of works by female artists in an art museum. But the reality is it's a teeny tiny percentage to this day. So what are the lessons from Georgia O'Keeffe that we can apply to help us understand what, you know, makes, how do we identify great art? She's just endlessly fascinating. I love the fact that she's funny and she's relatable. Early on when I was doing this, someone specifically asked me to create a portrayal of Jackie Kennedy. And I was really hesitant. Not that I have anything, I think she was beautiful. I've always been fascinated by her. But there were a couple of reasons I was really hesitant. Number one, I don't look a lot like her. And I'm not a skinny person, and she was a lot tinier than I am. But even more than that, I thought, oh, she hadn't really been a role model to me.
Right.
But as soon as I mentioned to people that I was thinking about doing a portrayal of her, oh my God, the reaction. So I thought, all right, I'm just going to try it. And I did. So I put together a portrayal, and I did it for a women's group that was having an afternoon tea. They had like twice as many people come up to this, sign up for this tea. So I realized, number one, this would be a good opportunity for me just in terms of working. But even more than that, when I got into her story, I thought, a lot of people fall in love with Jackie Kennedy for reasons that are totally understandable. She was incredibly beautiful. And, she really gave that White House this sense of history and culture that it really needed. The more I delved into the story, the more I thought, I think sometimes people want to see her because they want a story that is pretty and beautiful. I had a group one time and they say to me, we're interested in the pretty ladies. We want the pretty ladies. And I thought, I'm not sure that's what history really is about. But as I'm going through the Jackie Kennedy story, I thought, this is a woman who actually really did try to foreground, that she was a wife and a mother. And I do think that was what she was most important. But when you look at the public image of the Kennedy White House, you really see how much of it she really constructed. I mean, that whole sense of the Kennedy years as being youthful and beautiful and historic preservation of the White House, the whole notion of the arts as something that was embraced. This was enormously impactful. Even the idea that we think of the Kennedy years as Camelot, and whether you agree it was Camelot or not, historians have to confront this ingrained public idea of the Kennedy years as Camelot. She was the one who first put that forward. She was a lot savvier than she gets credit for. And I think she had much more of an influence than people actually think she has had. So that was a portrayal that actually surprised me. It was not a character that I would have chosen on my own, but I ended up being very grateful that I have done her. Here's what I would say. I was thinking about this because I'm doing a lecture right now on the history of Nancy Drew. And, when Nancy Drew first came out, libraries wouldn't stock it because they said, this is not moral instruction. This is not high literature. This is fluff. We're going to, maybe we'll buy a few copies, but they're not going in the card catalog because we don't want kids to think this is what they should be reading. But after a while, when you get to the 60s with the rise of television and movies, and increasingly kids are not reading at all. And suddenly people are saying, Nancy Drew is great because you get kids to read. Sometimes I feel that way with Jackie Kennedy, that people who might not be interested in history at all, they might not have any interest in going to see a historical portrayal of Georgia O'Keeffe or Rachel Carson, but they might go to a historical event about Jackie Kennedy, and maybe I can open their eyes a little bit to a more nuanced idea about who she was and what her importance was. You never know. You never know. I worked at a museum, and someone said to me with history, she said, what we do is not to, the whole point of it is not to tell someone everything there is to know about a topic. It's to light the candle. Get the flame going. Right. And I always think about that with the portrayals. I don't necessarily need to give people everything there is to know about a person's life. It's not a Wikipedia article that you turn into, a first person monologue. It's to reveal something about this person or about this topic that'll light a fire and get get
Right.
people interested in thinking and talking and maybe wanting to learn more. And if I can do that, I've done my job.